I'm late. I had to stop by the Wax Museum again and give the finger to FDR.
We know Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, is supporting the opposition in Syria. Are we supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria?
Well, it's a proud day for America. And by God, we've kicked Vietnam syndrome once and for all. Thank you very, very much.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked.
These witnesses are trying to simply deny things that just about everybody else accepts as fact.
He came, he saw, he died.
Well, we ain't killing their army, but we killing them. We be on CNN like, say our name, bitch, say it 3 times.
The meeting of the largest armies in the history of the world. Then there's going to be an invasion.
All right, y'all, introducing the great Sheldon Richman, my partner at the Libertarian Institute, libertarianinstitute.org. And every Friday, he writes TGIF. The goal is freedom. And this one is called Trump and Putin. How about getting rid of your nukes? Hey, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Welcome back to the show, Sheldon.
I thought it was a pretty good idea. Thanks for having me back. Love being here.
You know, the thing is with the nuclear weapons and the thermonuclear weapons is they burn really, really hot. Hotter than the sun even. They could kill your whole city.
Ouch.
Yeah.
I don't like to go to the beach because, you know, the sun, I burn easily. I'm fair skinned. So I don't think my doctor would want me to be, you know, in the vicinity of a nuclear explosion.
Yeah. All right. Now, so you want to talk about mutually assured destruction overall? You want to get rid of all the nukes or just most of them or what?
Well, I'd like to get rid of all of them. I think they ought to start on the road. They've been doing some of that. I mean, as the piece describes, just to give a bit of a context, I start off by saying that I, too, was disappointed in the Trump-Putin summit, but not for the reasons that most people have been disappointed by it. In fact, they're not even disappointed. Those people are like tearing their hair out, claiming that America is in effect been annexed by Russia. I guess that's what they think happened at the summit, because they at least expected Trump to walk across, you know, the little platform there and punch Putin in the nose, you know, for meddling in our election, and they didn't even get that, much less worse things. So I dismiss all that. That's not why I was disappointed. I was disappointed because the 2 huge nuclear arsenals held by these 2 countries he didn't tell us, neither one of them told us that those were of, frank, as I like to say, frank and full discussion during the closed-door meetings. To me, given the dangers you just already cited, that should have been at the top of the agenda. Both of them are operating under a regime called the New START, which was signed in 2011, which is, START stands for Strategic Talks on Reduction of whatever the T stands for. Anyway, it's about reducing launchers and nuclear and bombs and warheads. It was signed by Obama. And reduction has occurred under that on both sides. A lot of warheads have been put in storage, although they're ready, but they're not. They're ready. They could be taken out of storage. But the point is a bunch have been. And so the 2 right now, if we're talking about strategic weapons now, not the smaller tactical nukes, they're roughly even. It's like 4,000 for the U.S. and 4,100 or something for the Russians. It's pretty even. But that's going to that treaty is going to expire, but it can be extended for 5 years. Now, there were reports. Fox reported that Putin told Trump that he was willing to extend, but he wanted some clarifications first. He thinks the U.S. hasn't fully complied, but he wants to talk about it. We don't know what Trump said to him, but we do know that early in the Trump years, January, I believe, of 2017, on his first phone call to Putin asked him about New START. And, of course, characteristic of Trump, he had to say, hang on a second, please. And he put his hand over the phone. I'm imagining the scene here, but there were people inside the room who have told us this. He puts his hand over the phone and says, "Psst, what's New START?" And they quickly described it to him. And he got back on the phone and said, "Hey, Vlad, that was one of those stupid anti-American treaties signed before I got here. And I don't like it one bit. And it favors you guys. And I don't like it." And to our knowledge, he hasn't said anything more about New START since then. So it doesn't sound like he's going to be in the mood to talk about it or to extend it.
And as you mentioned in the article, Putin apparently said to him, or later at least he claimed, that he had told Trump during their meeting that, hey, what about New START again, right?
Well, that's right. Fox News reported that, and then Reuters relayed the Fox News report that he brought up. He said, we are willing to extend it for 5 years, which is allowed. There's a provision for that in the agreement, the treaty. But he said we need to sit down and talk about some things because he claims the U.S., I don't know the details of this, he claims the U.S. has not complied in all ways, and he said we want clarifications, we want to talk about this. But he said he's open to the extension. We don't know what Trump said to that. That wasn't in the report, and the only thing we have on the record from Trump about New START was what he told Putin in January 2017, namely, that's one of those idiotic things America has signed, and I guess he had Obama in mind in particular, and it's against us and it's in your favor. So that's the last word. That was the first and last word on START from Trump. So I don't know where it stands. So there's reason to be nervous about this. The bulletin of the atomic scientists have this doomsday clock, which they say is now 2 minutes to midnight, which is dangerous. Trump has taken all kinds of anti-Russian measures, despite statements he makes or things he might say about liking Putin or whatever people get so upset about. I mean, you look at the long list of things he's done. He's expanded NATO. Once again, Montenegro became a member under him. We have NATO troops on the Russian border. He's sending lethal aid to the Ukraine, which Obama opposed, and that used to be before he decided to do that. That used to be evidence that he was a Putin puppet, right? That he and the Republican Party generally, as like the Democrats. Most of the Democrats oppose sending lethal aid to Ukraine. Of course, quick context there. The U.S. helped to foment the coup that drove a democratically elected President Yanukovych, who was friendly with Russia and Putin, out of Ukraine, with neo-Nazis being part of the coup and the new government. But that's a different subject. He's imposed sanctions on Russia. He's kicked out diplomats on Russia. He's done all kinds of things against Russia, and yet that's not good enough. They wanted him to throw, a pie in Putin's face at this meeting because he allegedly meddled in the election, for which the government has yet to provide us any evidence. I noticed that the media is still saying, I know we're not on that subject, but the media is still saying, I saw on CNN the other day, every American intelligence agency unanimously assessed that the Russians meddled in the election. No, they have to say every agency unanimously. They have to have the redundancy because they know it's false. The New York Times retracted that, sometime last year. Right. They said, oops, no, we made a mistake. Hand-picked analysts by James Clapper, noted liar, who lied before the Senate and all the American people about mass spying. He handpicked a few analysts from 3 agencies who came up with this assessment in January 2017. Assessment, not evidence. Assessment that Russia did so-called hacking of the DNC. Anyway, that's a different subject.
No, it's an important point. And in fact, there's new news about that because just earlier this week or late last week, the second to last ambassador to the Soviet Union, Jack Matlock, reported that he had been told, it's hearsay, but still, I believe him, he'd been told by guys in the State Department that the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, which is, their CIA, basically, the State Department's own little in-house CIA, and who did such great buried dissents about Iraq War II, that they told him that they disagreed, but that they were not allowed to chime in.
Mm-hmm.
So they did. They certainly, as you say, they did not do a national intelligence estimate on this. No. Also, DIA, which knows the most about the GRU, obviously was not included either.
Right. And the New York Times said in a story at some point last year, we are wrong. We were wrong every time we said every intelligence agency signed on to this. And we also know that one of the 3 from which the handpicked analysts came from only had moderate confidence in the assessment. Don't forget, this is an assessment.
And in fact, you know what? One more thing on that too is, and Aaron Mate has shown this, and Scott Ritter showed this too in a recent piece in Truth Dig, which is that if you go back and look at the document that Reality Winner leaked to The Intercept, it shows right there in their color-coded thing, green line, red line, yellow line, in the key means this, that, and the other thing, that the assessment that the GRU was behind the hack and was behind Guccifer, etc., was an assessment by an analyst rather than something that was a proven fact by, say, the National Security Agency with ones and zeros on science. This was the best guess, basically, of some analysts. That's all.
Well, that's what an assessment means. They didn't lay out evidence. They said, here's what we think happens.
Well, I mean, they might have they could hypothetically have evidence, but still not tell you what it is, but still say this is based on intercepts. This is based on solid facts.
Right.
But instead, they're not saying that. Well, the indictment says that, but the Reality Winner NSA document certainly does not. And it's an NSA document, so they're the ones who would know.
But look, even the assessment in a famous footnote or infamous footnote said, hey, nothing here is a fact. In a sense, that's not a verbatim quote, but you can look that up. It says, these aren't facts we're talking about here. So they have yet to give us evidence. Now, people say, well, what about indictments? We have the 15 from St. Petersburg. We've got the 12 military intelligence guys, allegedly. But as everybody knows, if you've ever covered criminal courts or watched criminal shows about cops and trials and stuff, indictments are indictments. They're accusations. They're not evidence. So to say there was an indictment, I mean, after those indictments came down last week or the week before, people were saying, Trump ought to cancel the summit. But what happened to the rule of law? What happened to the burden of proof, presumption of innocence? So suddenly an indictment is enough. You then take measures. So I don't know what they wanted. First of all, Trump doesn't even, if you look at Trump's statements through that whole press conference, and it's worth watching, you find it online, it's like 45 minutes. He constantly is acknowledging that there was, he seems to believe there was meddling. Now, I realize there was confusion when he said something like, why would they? And then the next day he said, no, I meant to say, why wouldn't they? I can't understand his mind. He's got the most untidy mind, I think, in the human race. But he constantly talks about, we did not meddle with Russia. We did not collude with Russia on the meddling. All those statements seem to concede that he believes concede the meddling charge. I don't, because I want to see the evidence. But he seems to be saying, look, I don't question that they meddled, but we didn't collude, and there's no evidence, and no one's been indicted for colluding. So I don't even know what they want from Trump. It seems like he's given them, what do they want, a war? Which brings us back to my topic. We are living in dangerous times because these two countries, and not the only ones, we got China, we got India, we got Israel, we got Pakistan, we got France, we got England. I mean, a lot of other countries are nuclear powers, acknowledged. Israel's not acknowledged, but it's the greatest open secret ever. This is dangerous, and we need to be talking about, at least, to begin scaling back. I don't imagine in my wildest dreams they would ever just sort of get rid of them all in one fell swoop. But we need to take things like New START and build on it and make it more vigorous and really try to diffuse this. We have a whole bunch of bombers on high alert. In 2008, when Obama was running for president the first time, he expressed concern about this. And typical of Obama, he expressed concern about a whole bunch of things in 2008 when he ran for president, and then never did a damn thing about any of them. I mean, he was such a loser, such a non-entity. I don't know how anybody has an ounce of respect for the guy. But he did nothing. And the evidence for that is, in 2016, a whole group of scientists wrote him and said, this is really dangerous that we have all these bombers on high alert. In other words, the president could just tell them to go, and it wouldn't take very long. This letter points out that George H.W. Bush took what did he take? The land-based missiles off high alert? I forget to look at the letter. But he took one leg of the triad off of high alert, and now these scientists say it's time we do this now with the with the one of the other.
It was the planes. H.W. Bush was the planes, and now they're saying let's take the ground-based silo missiles off of high alert too.
Still leave
and leave us with just the submarines, which is more than enough to kill all of humanity. Thank you.
Submarines are very deadly and undetectable. So yeah, they're kind of in a category by themselves because they can't be hit on a first strike. The land missiles can be hit on a first strike.
So you know what? I'm sorry. I have to add here that I've done an interview about this before. That the only reason for the land-based silos is to attract Russian H-bombs so that Colorado and Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska and the Dakotas and Wyoming, these will be the nuclear sponge to save the people on the East Coast who started the war from getting nuked in the war that they started, and instead letting flyover country take the bulk of the Russian missile strike, whoever started it. And so that's the only reason that they're there, really.
Yeah. Yep.
The nuclear sponge, that's their strategy. That's what they call it. They wrote that down and signed their names on the bottom of it.
It's ridiculous that, I'm glad there's been reductions. It's not insignificant reduction, but what's left is still sufficient to destroy the world. So we can't just relax. And we've been lucky that accident is as much to be feared as an intentional war, maybe more so, because at least, I assume, I don't know about Trump. I think most of these rulers of nuclear countries they're not suicidal, and I think they'd be very nervous about anything that approached the brink of nuclear war. Not that it's impossible, but I think everybody understands how, horrible that would be. But there could be accidents, and things could be set in motion, and there can be a misreading of signals and things like that. There have been over the years. We've been lucky that nothing ever, got launched as a result.
Especially in an atmosphere like this.
Well, we can't count on that. Just because we were lucky for more than 70 years now doesn't mean we'll get through the next 70 years.
Right.
So we should not relax, and I don't know why. Number one, this isn't on the minds of people who claim they're for peace. Liberals and progressives and anybody who says they're for peace, and why it was not front and center for these two guys, and why they didn't, if they talked about it, why didn't they talk about it more in public? Saying,
and that would have been such great politics too, for Donald Trump to say, look, we're going to do a new nuclear arms reduction deal. Go ahead, Democrats, attack me for that, and let's see how much mileage you get out of that. The American people would support that, absolutely,
And Trump occasionally will say, he'll talk about, what did he learn this all from his uncle, he says, right, who was at MIT?
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He'll say something like, I know better than anybody in the world. Of course, anything he knows better than anybody in the world.
Right.
I know how devastating these weapons are. He'll say that once. He'll sprinkle that into things now and then. He twice said during the summit, both before the closed meeting and after the closed meeting, that the U.S. and Russia have 90% of the nuclear weapons, which he was presenting as a negative thing.
Right.
So he does say this, but he never follows through, which is true on anything. Anything he says, even when he makes a good statement, he never has a second statement to show he really understands it. He just like a talking point or it's a pose of some kind.
It reminds me of Obama's big Prague speech in the Czech Republic, where the whole first half of the speech, he's like, man, we've got to move toward a world without nuclear weapons. And the whole crowd, they're like on their tiptoes and they're all excited and they're all happy. And then the second part of the speech, he's like, yeah, but, of course, this is just a pipe dream and I'm just blowing smoke. And this is just an excuse to put missile radar systems in your country. And you can see the entire crowd like, and then all their shoulders slump and they all start looking at their feet disappointed.
It's good enough to get a Nobel Prize, Peace Prize.
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned missile defense, which I don't touch on. That's a whole other subject. It's a great subject. U.S. and of course has been putting missile defenses near the Russian border. Now, people, I think this is an important point. A lot of people will say, "Well, it's missile defense. What's wrong with that?" But that's not. That you got to think about that for a second. Imagine a shield. Let's go back to sort of medieval combat when you had a shield. Sure, a shield can be a defense, but a shield can also be an offensive tool, right? You want to advance on the person you want to kill, And it helps to have a shield so he can't hurt you. That doesn't mean you don't want to hurt him first. So just because we call something defensive doesn't mean it can't be used as part of an offensive plan. So
Same as defensive weapons we're sending to Ukraine, anti-tank missiles or whatever. Well, you could use those offensively too.
That's right. Like any weapon, like Shane in the famous movie Shane says about a gun. A gun's just a tool. It could be like a hammer. You can build a house with a hammer, or you can kill a person with a hammer. You can kill a person in self-defense with a hammer, but you could murder a person with a hammer. So we shouldn't be fooled by this. Given the context, the full context, putting missile defenses, in Poland or wherever they're planning to put them or where they're starting, I guess.
Well, I think Obama eventually backed down on that. That was the great quote where he was secretly caught on the mic telling Medvedev, once I get reelected, then it'll be all right and I can change the policy, which he did, to his credit.
But in the context with NATO expansion and maneuvers, at the NATO border or at the Russian border, think how scary that would be for any Russian who lived through the 20th century, where there were 3 invasions of Russia through Eastern Europe. Putting missile defenses in this climate is provocative, because it means, hey, we can hit you, but we have defenses when you try to hit us back.
Well, and this is the whole thing, right, where everybody's supposed to have magic mind reading powers, but they don't. And so, you mentioned mistakes, and I'm reminded of 1983 when the context was Reagan was canceling détente and was reinstituting brinksmanship and arms racing and all this, and had made all these statements, joking around basically, but pretty loose lips about the bombing starts in 5 minutes and this kind of thing. Yeah. And then when they did the big military exercise in the NATO military exercise, Able Archer, in 1983, the Russians, the Soviets, were going to launch a war right then because they were convinced that this was cover for an American first strike, that NATO was about to attack them and that it wasn't an exercise. It was the war. It's come. And the only reason that they didn't start launching nukes at Western Europe and the U.S. right then was because there was a communist, dirty rat traitor spy inside NATO. I think he was a Brit, who told them, I swear to God, it's just an exercise. Don't freak out. It's not an invasion. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. And so the Russians backed down. But that could have been the end of mankind right there, based on a conclusion, right? An assessment by Russian intelligence that this set of exercises plus Reagan's bellicose rhetoric equals we can't take the risk. They're about to attack us. And they were wrong. But if it hadn't have been for that traitor telling them the truth, we'd all been dead.
There's a general point here that I think is worth pointing out. The Americans, and this goes back to right after World War II, the Americans always applied a double standard to themselves and the Russians, I suppose to the Chinese too, but mainly the Russians. The idea was when it comes to the Russians, you look at capability, not intentions. When it comes to us, others should look at our intentions, not our capability. Mm-hmm. So in other words, we're good. Our intentions are good. So no matter what weapons we build and aim at people, there's nothing to worry about. We're the good guys.
Right, and they must know that, and so we can do whatever we want.
But the other side is, even if you show, they have no interest in it. They're not suicidal. They're not going to launch an attack on the United States. The answer to that would be, we don't care about intentions. Look at their capability. But us, don't look at our capability. Look at our intentions.
Well, and you know what?
This is ridiculous. This is not a respectable argument. And it has rigged the whole public discussion ever since.
Well, you know, Pat Buchanan, I think, says it the best, where he says, listen, the line was drawn during the Cold War by Truman, Eisenhower, and on through George H.W. Bush, that if the Soviet Union ever tries to roll into Western Germany, then we will go to nuclear war. That's the line in the sand. We will give up your hometown to defend Western Europe from Soviet attack. That was the line. And as Pat says, they've now moved that line more than 1,000 miles east, all the way where that line literally is the western border of Russia. So if they roll, and not that they're going to, but if they roll into Estonia, then we will go to nuclear war to defend Estonia, not Western Germany, not France and Britain, but Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, now, all the Balkans as well. And they even talk about bringing Ukraine in. And
Montenegro.
Montenegro, all the Balkan states. And so if the Russians were that panicked in 1983 under Reagan when the line was 1,500 miles to the west, how must they really feel about it when we have our boats in the Baltic Sea and we literally have troops just a few hundred miles from Moscow in the Baltic states?
Right. And also, and with Ukraine, of course, NATO, therefore, was threatening their warm water port on the Black Sea in Crimea, which, of course, had been in the possession of Russia since the 18th century under Catherine the Great. So no wonder they got nervous about that and did what they did with Crimea. And regardless of what you think of what happened in Crimea, you can't judge it out of context. You have to look at you have to watch the whole movie, not only beginning with the coup in Ukraine, but you got to go back further. It's not for nothing that George Kennan, who was considered the father of containment policy at the end of World War II, in 1998 said it's crazy to move NATO any distance eastward, and it broke the promise that George H.W. Bush made to Gorbachev. He told Gorbachev, "Look, here's the deal. If you don't object to the reunification of Germany and Germany's membership in NATO, we will not move NATO 1 inch closer to you." And this was delivered by, I think, James Baker, Secretary of State, to Gorbachev, and Gorbachev agreed. And unfortunately, he didn't get it in writing. And then it was completely ignored by Clinton and his successors. And they took in all the Warsaw Pact countries, the Baltic states. Now a couple of former Soviet republics, and more talked about. Like you said, Ukraine and Georgia. That's still kind of on and then I believe they're in that sort of halfway house, that partnership you can be part of before you get full-fledged NATO, like pledges or like NATO pledges in the fraternity. Mm-hmm. They got to go out and they get hazed a little bit, but otherwise, someday they'll be members. Why wouldn't a Russian look at this and say, uh-oh, and I'll go even further. It's the kind of policy that creates a Putin, that brings somebody like Putin to power. After the way Russia got treated in the 90s, the way Yeltsin, who was, I guess, drunk most of the time on his vodka, and the way they took advantage of the economy and sold off assets, and then plus the NATO expansion, how would somebody like Putin not arise and say, we're not going to take this anymore? That's the kind of thing that creates somebody like that. I don't want to compare him to Hitler. I know Hillary did that, and it's outrageous. I mean, it trivializes Hitler to say Putin's Hitler. But there's one similarity in the rise of Hitler and the rise of Putin. And this is not controversial. Many historians now argue this, and others argue it. Given the way Germany was treated at the Paris peace talks, where it was branded as the only guilty nation and had massive reparations imposed and starvation blockade that went on for months after the armistice was signed, given all those things, who'd be after lesser politicians in Germany tried to get a revision of the treaty, and a lot of Westerners, Americans, thought the Versailles Treaty should have been revised because it was so draconian to Germany. Who would have been surprised at a strong man? Who could be surprised that a strong man didn't arise? And, of course, we should have learned our lesson from the fact that it was Hitler who wreaked so much havoc and death and destruction on so many people. Wouldn't we have learned by then? I mean, they kind of knew it in 1815 when after the Napoleonic Wars, they had a much more even-handed, respectful peace conference, and there wasn't anything like a world war in the next 100 years. So Putin didn't come out of nowhere. He came out of Western and particularly American and World Bank and IMF and all that stuff trashing of the Russians, and it was a very hard time, a transition from the Soviet system to something more liberal was never going to be easy or abrupt. It wasn't going to happen overnight. There were going to be difficulties, dislocations. People were going to be on hard times. There's no doubt about that. Free markets, the greatness of free markets doesn't come in an instant. Nothing happens in an instant. Light doesn't travel in an instant. We know that from the physicists. So it was a very sensitive time. And what did the U.S. do? They played like it was their own backyard and they could do whatever they want. So of course a Putin is going to arise. So we created this quote foe. I don't see why we shouldn't see him as a foe, even if Trump does. It's just all nonsense. And here's the craziest thing is that the Democrats and people who call themselves liberals and progressives are feeding this. They're feeding these flames. What do they want? What do they want? A war? Well, they better think about it, because they may end up getting that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just want a Cold War, but it might not stay cold. That's the real problem, Yeah. Having Saddam Hussein to beat up on, that's pretty easy. What the hell's he going to do about it, right? But the Russians, this could get out of control.
Think of the image of Randolph Bourne when he was warning against the U.S. getting into World War I. He said, "Oh yeah, you," and he was arguing against his fellow progressives. He said, "Yeah, you think you could guide this and use it to achieve reforms at home," and he basically says, "You guys are nuts. You're talking about mounting a wild elephant. That's what you're doing."
Yeah.
So don't tell me, "Oh, we're going to use this for such constructive things," self-determination and reform at home. He was about the only person in his milieu. I mean, these were all his friends who then didn't want to have anything to do with him, because he was the only guy of that group saying that. You're all crazy. And I guess he's right. He was right.
Yeah.
War's the health of the state, and it's also the health. It also causes chaos. Certainly in an initial stage. So, look at the invasion of Iraq. It causes chaos. It doesn't cause good things. Mm-hmm. So what do you make about all the panic that now it comes out that Trump invited Putin to D.C.? This is going to be... I thought that was the first thing he should have done as soon as he took power, just to shove it down the Democrats' throats. Yeah. But at this point, man, I don't know how it's going to play out. It could be really bad. Overall, including the reactions to it and everything. While all this reaction scares me, because who knows what they're going to do, I find it hilariously funny. They think that there's some horrible thing that's going to happen if Putin is standing in the Oval Office. I just don't understand these people. In a way, I do understand them. They can't get over the fact that their person lost for president, who was entitled, it was supposed to be inevitable. She lost, and not only did she lose to a Republican, she lost to Trump, which I still find amazing. When I look at Trump behind the podium, and I am not enamored with the presidency or the White House or any of the trappings of nationalism. To me, it's all superstition, and I throw it all out. But when I see him back there, even I say, "No, this is a dream. Come on, I got to wake up." Oh wait, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. I know, I share that, but I'm not deranged. Yeah. I'm not deranged by it. And and of course, it's pretty easy for a guy like you to see why she lost. She's Hillary Clinton. She's had a negative approval rating that has never gone below 45% since 1992. In fact, she's half the reason everybody hated Bill Clinton so much, because he was Billery, and he was more her than him. And she was the lightning rod even more than Bill was back then. She was a terrible, terrible candidate. And, Bernie Sanders tried to point it out. Not that I like most of the positions Bernie Sanders was taking, but he did try to point it out. He said, "Let's see your speeches to Goldman Sachs." And she, like an idiot said, "Well, when Trump shows his tax returns, I'll release my speeches." What's one thing have to do with the other? So, were Bernie fans supposed to be mollified by that? He tried to point it out. Trump was inept in even pointing out her problems. There's so much he could have said about her. I don't mean personal stuff. I mean all the decisions, public policy decisions she has been involved in. Right. He even debuted Trigger Happy Hillary, but then he basically dropped it. When that was the one, man, he could have just completely beat her over the head with that. Oh, Libya, he could have gotten her on Libya. He could have gotten her on because he was somewhat weakened because he called for intervention in Libya. And he told Howard Stern, "Yeah, we should go into Iraq." Bush's father should have done it 10 years ago. So he lies when he says he was against those wars. He wasn't. Although there was a quote from him like 1 week after the war started saying it's a disaster, which that's pretty soon to turn on the war. I think he may have changed his mind about it before the war started, because that Howard Stern quote comes from the fall. But you're right, though. Still all over the place.
Certainly, he's no, reliable anti-war guy. That's for sure. Although, you know what? He didn't have the power at the time. Hillary voted for the war in Iraq, and she's the one who convinced Obama to launch the war in Libya. Yeah. So that's a whole other level of responsibility, orders of magnitude greater than some hack, TV star, former real estate developer opinioning on the Howard Stern show.
Obama has said that he didn't want to go in. She was the last person he talked to. And then afterwards, he said it was the worst mistake of his presidency.
All right, you guys, Tom Woods has been trying to get me to do this forever on Facebook, but I hate Facebook. But now I'm going to do it on Reddit instead. Anyone who donates a monthly subscription donation at paypal.com or at patreon.com/Scott Horton Show will get a ticket to join up my new private Reddit group at r/Scott Horton Show. Just email me and I'll get you set up. Any single PayPal donation of $50 will get you a signed copy of my book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. And a $100 donation will get you either a QR code silver commodity disc or a lifetime subscription to Listen and Think audiobooks. Of course, I accept all kinds of digital currencies as well. You can find out all this stuff at scotthorton.org/donate. And of course, don't forget to shop Amazon.com by way of my link and give me a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or Amazon if you read the book and liked it. Thanks. Yep. Well, not invading, but refusing to invade outright and stay and occupy and build the country like worked so well in Iraq.
Yeah, but when you think about that, that really means invading, because there was no way he was going to get away with doing that, or that he could have done that. To invade a ground invasion of another country.
Anyways, though, point being that only Hillary Clinton could have lost to Donald Trump, and that's the only reason we're in this mess. And you know what? We might as well add that it was, I don't know about her personally, but certainly her campaign said we need to push what they called the Pied Piper strategy of getting their friends in the media to promote Cruz, Carson, and Trump above all, because they're the wingers, they're the kooks, and they'll be the easiest to beat in the fall. And so that was why they were showing, an hour worth of empty podium waiting for Trump to arrive, throughout that whole year of 2015 and 16.
Those were the days when I watched CNN, and I would have that on and, making dinner or something, saying, there's the empty podium again. Trump's be coming on soon. It was reality.
And that wasn't because they were doing him a favor. That's because they were doing Hillary Clinton a favor, one that blew up right in her face.
It did him a favor. He got
but I mean, not intentionally. They were doing it they were trying to help him, but only to help her.
No, it makes sense that if you're Clinton and you favor Clinton, you're going to want who seems to be the craziest candidate, the easiest person to beat, and that's they were stung by that, and so they got to blame everybody. It's either Russia or Comey or somebody. In fact, she said in an interview, I think last year, she seems to me she was, at least for the moment, giving up the Russia as scapegoat, because she said, if the election had been October 27th, I'd be president today. Well, guess what happened on October 28th? That's when Comey made the second statement about the cases reopened, because we're looking at what was his name, Anthony Weiner's laptop, right? Because there were emails to and from Uma Abedin. So she was, and the Russia stuff had already come out by then. I mean, not the Russia stuff, but I mean the emails had come out. So here she is saying, no, in effect, it wasn't Russia. Comey did me in. And so what are we talking about Russia for?
And you know what? Never forget, too, as Peter Van Buren points out in his article today on the American Conservative Magazine, that Comey, Clapper, and Brennan have a huge personal interest in putting all of this on Trump and all on Russia to kind of obscure the fact that they're in charge of counterintelligence and all this happened on their watch. They're saying this lady who was, running around with the gun show circuit and the NRA and trying to make these inroads with the Republicans and all this was going on for years. Well, where the hell was the FBI counterintelligence division during all this? Now it's the worst scandal that ever happened. But while it was going on, where the hell were they?
Well, yeah.
It's their fault in the first place, if it's even true that she even, did anything beyond, and I think it was you actually that was pointing out to me that, geez, she was sending her messages to her handler by way of Twitter, direct message. This is not a deep cover agent here, or not a very well-trained one.
No, it's a mess. And Trump brings some of this stuff up. Trump, he never knows the right time to do it. I mean, in the press conference with Putin, I don't know that he should have gone off on, where's the DNC server? How come the FBI never got to see the DNC server? These are valid points. But as usual, Trump doesn't know the proper place or time. Yeah. He should have been talking about nuclear weapons. And he did talk about nuclear proliferation, the point I'm making in the article. Mm-hmm. He mentions proliferation, and he's not exactly up on the lingo. He may mean by that, he may include in that the U.S. and Russian arsenals. But typically that means Russia and the U.S. keeping nukes out of the hands of lesser powers, right? So, in other words, he's talking to Kim in North Korea in the name of nuclear non-proliferation. In other words, keeping it out of new hands or getting little powers to give it up. But he kept talking about nuclear proliferation. I don't know that he understands what he understands by that topic, but he didn't explicitly say, except for the 90% comment, but which he doesn't develop. He should have said the most urgent thing for us, and we're going to talk about this, is our arsenals. And we got to find ways to really drastically cut these and reduce the chances of accidents and just make them the world safer.
Well, and of course, when he talks about proliferation, he seems to be going along with the John Bolton plan for North Korea from 2002 on Iran right now. Let's see. And we've heard Bolton say this before. Back in 2007, he was recorded on an American-Israel Public Affairs Committee conference call saying that, yeah, I'm really disappointed because what we were trying to do was force the Iranians to go ahead and leave the non-proliferation treaty and kick the inspectors out, which we think would put us in a more advantageous position. In other words, do like he did with Korea, push them toward nuclear weapons and then use that as an excuse to attack them. Now, in Korea, they were so bogged down in Iraq, they never got to attack Korea, so Korea just got their hands on a bunch of nukes. Oops. So at least they want to negotiate their way out of that crisis. But it looks like Trump is following the Bolton playbook on Iran right now. Iran that wasn't making nuclear weapons, and they're still not, but it seems like they're trying to get them to be so frustrated with the system that they'll go ahead and quit the NPT regime. Now, I don't think Khamenei is that stupid, but John Bolton is,
Well, that's right, and so these people that claim that the people on the other side who claim that Trump is so pro-peace need to explain what's happening with Iran. I mean, Iran never left the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. It was already under strict inspection regime. So this JCPOA with the multilateral talks got even more. And the most, as even Putin, I think, pointed out at the press conference, the most intrusive inspections ever known. And Trump, constantly trashes it and has now renounced it. And if he's so pro-peace, what the hell is he rattling his saber at Iran so often for? Yeah. Why is he doing that?
And and if he's Putin's agent, why won't Putin just tell him, hey, man, the JCPOA really wasn't so bad, dude. You ought to go back to it.
Yeah, they helped facilitate. The Russians were very helpful in getting the things going. As you note.
They really did pressure the Ayatollah that, hey, we would like to see you do this thing.
Right, and as you say, they weren't making nukes. People can read Gareth Porter's great book, Manufactured Crisis, for documentation of that. They weren't making them. The Bush administration knew they weren't, and so it lost a chance to go to war during the Bush W. Bush years because they didn't have the intelligence agencies saying they have nuclear weapons. In fact, they said Even some research they had been doing earlier had been long ago had been canceled, been scrapped. So there was nothing there, but still Iran is eager to get back into the world economy because the sanctions have been crippling, and so they were willing to do that, and they've done quite a bit. Obviously, they're complying. No one seriously says they're not complying. But this is like a bee in Trump's bonnet, and he won't let it go. And there are all kinds of ugly things. You point out constantly on your program how terrorist groups are helped along by the U.S. and Israel to make trouble for Iran, including that MEK cult that great Americans like Newt Gingrich and Ed Rendell and Howard Dean love to get speaking honoraria from. what the hell's Trump up to with that? I'm glad he sat down with Kim. I hope that continues and there's a peace treaty and all that stuff. It's kind of on the back burner now, at least publicly. But what about Iran? I don't know what he's doing with Iran.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, man, it's such a backwards ass time we're living in here where, it reminds me of 2002, the level of, just the ratio between the truth and the narrative here. But then it was, a mad president marching us to war, and all the opposition against him was saying, no, we shouldn't have a war. We should have peace here instead, and this and that. But now you have a president who's bombing 8 or 10 countries. Nobody opposed him over that at all. He gets no criticism from the other party for that at all because he's just carrying out Barack Obama's policy there, including both sides of the war in Yemen and all of the rest of this stuff. He's backed off to support for al-Qaeda in Syria, but he's still occupying the place and all this. And nobody ever attacks him for that. They only attack him and because the resistance against him is led by the intelligence agencies and the political center and the military industrial complex and the mainstream media. So what they attack him for? Trying to make peace in Korea or in Russia. And there are people who, you saw the hashtag the other day, the Treason Summit. So Barack Obama literally backing al-Qaeda in Syria, well, that's fine because, Assad's a bad guy or something like that. But trying to make peace with the equal, basically, nuclear weapons power on Earth, that's treason. And if dealing with Kim isn't treason, it's at least the dumbest, most naive, horrible thing that the president could do. Why, he's going to undermine our justification for keeping troops in South Korea. Then where will we be, Sheldon?
Yeah. No, the people who are spearheading this movement against Trump, there's plenty to go after Trump for, but the people that are doing this, I just think one day they're going to look back and say, we were just crazy. We just went hysterical and lost all judgment. I hope they one day face it.
Yeah, assuming that we all survive this.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And what do they think? If they don't do that, it means they're pro-Trump? Well, that's ridiculous. There are plenty of people like you and me who hit Trump where he ought to be hit, and that's an awful lot of places. We've been doing it today. On the other hand, point out where they shouldn't be hitting him. He's done lots of terrible things. Look, there are probably even grounds for impeachment on some of these other things. Instead, they're talking about collusion with Russia and meeting with Kim or meeting with Putin. It's ridiculous. Does he get criticized for meeting with Netanyahu? Look what Netanyahu's doing and to the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. Why isn't he accused of cultivating that strong man?
Yeah.
He's a strong man.
By the way, as long as you bring that up, let me ask you one more thing here. And I'm late as hell. I got to go, but I blew it in my previous interview. It was about Russia, but we got off on a tangent about Israel-Palestine, and the guy's an ardent Zionist. And part of his argument was that, even when the Israelis' offers may not have been perfect, the Palestinians refused to even come up with any kind of counter offer, much less a reasonable one, and what have you. And I know I'm wrong. I know he was wrong, but I know I dropped the ball on contradicting him on that. So I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about, and this is in one of your more recent columns too, your reference to the Palestine Papers and the degree of obsequiousness of the Palestinian Authority over the last few years here, over the last couple decades even.
Well, much can be said about this, including what even surrounding our countries have offered. Because we have from the early 2000s, 2002, a sort of a grand bargain made by the Arab League, which Iran even endorsed, which would have been a comprehensive settlement, a two-state settlement, which Israel just, tore up, put in the paper shredder. But on the Palestine Papers, right, and you go back to my article from last week, I guess there's a link to it. They were talking about two states, and the Palestinians came up and they brought in their most distinguished cartographers. People who know that territory literally the palm of their hand. They know every line and every bridge and everything that's built on it and every bit of open space. And they presented a map which made huge concessions, letting the Israelis keep 60-some% of the settlements in the West Bank. And now that's a pretty concentrated area. That's not a huge amount of territory. It's only like 2% of the West Bank. And they asked in return for equivalent amount of land, which they also showed on the map. So they presented this detailed map to Tzipi Livni, who was the foreign minister and chief negotiator. And according to descriptions out of those meetings, because these Palestine papers contain memos and accounts of the meetings and transcripts and all this stuff, and she was impressed with the map. She even said, well, what about these two settlements? And the guy said, oh, a bridge could be built there. Or what about here? Oh, there's already a road, but an additional road. In other words, they were completely prepared about how this was a workable map. And she ended up saying, apparently the look of being very impressed, the look of being impressed on her face, looked and said, no prime minister could ever accept this and survive politically. Her rejection of it was political, not that it was otherwise feasible. In other words, and Norman Finkelstein makes this point. People say the two-state solution is dead, and I'm not so much taking a position here, but I'm sort of describing because of all the settlements and the wall and things like that. But it looks like from this offer that was made and Livni's reaction to it, that in a way it's not really dead. I mean, they could do it where there would still be a contiguous Palestinian area in the West Bank linked to Gaza. And so it's not impossible. I mean, maybe it's not the best thing in the world. Maybe one secular state is best. Even I don't want to get into that. But it's not sort of physically impossible the way some people claim. As to the point you're raising, it's just wrong to say they've never offered anything. Even the story about the 2000 Camp David meetings with Clinton and Ehud Barak and Arafat is false. That they just rejected a generous offer. That's the story, right? Yasser Arafat rejected this super generous offer, and it was turned down by Arafat without any counteroffer. That's just nonsense. For one thing, the talks picked up a few months later. They then got canceled by Israel because they had an election coming up, and they were afraid they'd lose the election. Barak was. So that's just wrong. It's just wrong to say the way Abba Eban famously said it, and it was insulting and patronizing. The Palestinians never miss an opportunity for peace. That's just typical Israeli propaganda. They never give an inch rhetorically or any other way. They've made no concessions regarding their own obligations under international law. Oh, yeah, sometimes they may slightly modify one of their, bottom line demands and then claim, oh, look how generous we are. But they don't make a single step in the direction of fulfilling their obligations under international law, which apply to refugees and applies to occupation of land. They're 50 years they're occupying land. That's not an occupation anymore. That's a de facto annexation. That's illegal under international law. Settlements, transferring your population to occupied land against an international law. Building settlements, building walls, taking people's property to build walls, Arab property. That's all illegal. They never make any concession in that direction.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, too, about the wall. Can you talk about the wall a little bit and how it doesn't just protect these settlements? It snakes all over the damn place, and for a very good reason other than protecting those settlements, right?
I think people think that wall is along the 67 line, right? It separates the West Bank from Israel pre-67. Of course, it doesn't do that. It's not like Trump's forthcoming wall that's supposed to go along the border. It doesn't go along the border. Like you say, it snakes deep inside. It encircles things. It encircles Jewish settlements, Jewish-only settlements. It separates Palestinian communities from each other. You can find the map. Look up where was it? Atlantic. Was it the Atlantic that had the map that shocked Barack Obama just a couple weeks ago?
The New Yorker.
The New Yorker. Look that up. Yes, the New Yorker. That's right. Look that up. And actually, I want to say one more thing about that in a second. But it'll show you the map. If you look at the map today and say, you'll immediately say, how could the Palestinians have a state? Their little communities, their towns are like all separated from each other. Because Area C, which is under the control, which is 60% of the West Bank and under control of the Israelis, is not just like when you hear about A, B, and C, because the Oslo Accord set up 3 areas, right? A, B, and C. C is where Israel mainly is right now. there's some amount of home rule in A and B. But that makes it sound like they're like 3 blocks stacked, right? A, B, and C. And so the southern part must be C. No, C is all over the place. It surrounds Palestinian towns. There would be no contiguity in a Palestinian state under that setup.
Let me add here, too, that this is the leaked video of Netanyahu bragging about how he screwed Bill Clinton. And the famous phrase is, the Americans are easily moved. 80% of them support us. It's absurd, he said, mocking us. But the context was they were talking about how, so I told Bill Clinton, well, we're just going to stay in Area C. Ha ha, but see, the deal is Area C is more than 2/3 of the whole West Bank, sucker. And
look at the map. It's not even like I say, it's not a block. It goes all through the whole, from north to south of the West Bank. And I want to say one more thing then about the this map that apparently shocked Obama. I saw a quick interview with Ali Abu Nima of the Electronic Intifada. He's a very bright guy. He knew Obama when Obama was his state senator. In fact, right-wing sites used to like to go after Obama, saying he's friends with this Palestinian. Well, big deal. But Abu Nima says, well, we actually weren't friends. I mean, I met him. He was my state senator, but it wasn't like they were buddies. So, but that aside, he thinks it's a big lie that Obama was shocked by this. He's no fan of Obama's. He says there's no way Obama was shocked by this, because while Obama was not an expert in the Middle East, he was somewhat curious and did have conversations with people even before he was president. And he knew what was going on. There's no way in 2016 State Department people bring him this map and he's shocked. He just, Abu Nima just refuses to believe that. He thinks it's whitewashing to make Obama look
that too.
In fact, it makes Obama look bad, right? They may think it makes him look good. He was shocked. But why does he only know about this in 2016? So I think it makes him look bad. But anyway, I think that's worth pointing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is something that my guest that I was arguing with has this whole, Newt Gingrich line that Barack Obama was, some kind of leftist, black nationalist, anti-colonialist, that anti-Americanist, and that all he did was see the whole world as being poor and oppressed by America, and all he wanted to do was, weaken America's influence over the rest of the world and this kind of thing, which, I guess, when it comes to question begging and that kind of thing, if that's your conclusion and you only see things through those eyes, then I guess you can, see some of the things he did in that way. But, if that was really true, and I said, well, if that was really true, look at all he could have done in Israel-Palestine that he didn't do. And then the answer to that was, well, he was just constrained by Congress and others.
Oh, yeah. And Guantanamo, he was just restrained. Right. Look, even by progressive standards, he's got to be the biggest fraud in American politics for a very long time. Yeah. All these things he said, which he didn't give a damn about once he got in. Yep. And I'm not buying, I couldn't do anything, Congress, this, that. What did he do? He increased the bureaucracy over the medical system. And, what else?
Yeah, he raised my premium so high that I now have to be on welfare in order to even pay it and get not outright Medicaid, but the subsidy. And then, I can't have my subsidy because my tax return didn't turn in on time. So now my lupus wife has no health care at all. Thank you, Democrats. That's my fault for not being in good with the IRS. I know. Except before I could buy her health care, IRS be damned. But anyway, yeah.
I didn't mean to open up the whole Obamacare thing, but just terms of war and peace.
I hate Democrats so much.
In terms of war and peace, I don't see how any honest progressive who cares about peace cannot see him as just an unbelievable fraud and con man. I mean, he made all these appeals. He even gets this Nobel Peace Prize, and for his aspirations. I mean, I can't believe the Nobel Committee went along with this. And then look what he did. He totally took, and you'll hear people say, pro-Israel people say, he was the worst president for Israel ever. Yeah, he sets a record for aid. That $38 billion package, 10-year package. What did he do besides, maybe saying something about not liking Netanyahu? Who's not a very
what he did was he went along with whatever Netanyahu wanted, which is terrible for Israel over the long term. So, yeah, just like, if you really want to screw the Israelis, you should replace their entire Air Force with F-35s. Watch them fall right out of the sky.
Yeah,
that's what I would do.
I don't think that's what they mean.
No, I guess not. All right, listen, I'm late as hell for my next guest. I hope Andrew Coburn will still want to talk with me, but I just love talking with you so much, Sheldon. I can't put it up.
I don't want to take anything away from Andrew Coburn. I'm a big fan of his. Say hi to me. Say hi to him for me.
I sure will. Thank you very much again, Sheldon. Appreciate it.
Okay, talk to you soon, Scott.
All right, you guys, that's my good friend and yours, the heroic Sheldon Richman, my partner at the Libertarian Institute, libertarianinstitute.org. And every Friday, he writes TGIF. The goal is freedom. Trump and Putin. How about getting rid of your nukes? And by the way, I was just thinking, I was talking with Jared last night, our other partner at the Libertarian Institute, about how, it must have been just about exactly 10 years ago at the FFF conference in 2008 when I met Sheldon Richman. And he said to me, hey, I love your show. And I couldn't believe it. We've been friends ever since. Ain't that cool? Yeah. All right. Sheldon Richman, libertarianinstitute.org. All right, y'all. That's it for the show. Check me out at libertarianinstitute.org, scotthorton.org, antiwar.com, twitter.com/Scott Horton Show. Appreciate it. And buy my book, Fool's Errand, Timed and the War in Afghanistan.